We're back on Night School, our second half hour of what is obviously going to be a fast-moving 90 minutes. And this half hour will go very quickly, too, because Sid Fernando Sid Fernandez was the wonderful Mets pitcher, Sid. So funny. Sid Fernando joins us from Work Thoroughbred Consultants, and Sid's a big baseball fan, so it's not inappropriate.
No,
Evening,
not
Sid.
I'm flattered, actually. Thanks. Great to see you. Great to hear from you, Steve. And is Jeremy there too?
Hey, Jeremy is there, and Sid, we thought of you immediately when this topic came up because you're so well qualified to do both the nuts and bolts conversation when it comes to breeding and matings and the nuts and bolts portion of what goes into making a horse from the breeding side, but then in terms of translating a pedigree into aptitudes for the racetrack, you've got a great way of delivering that portion of the subject as well, and would love for you to give everybody a kind of a top line introduction to what the pedigree says when people are looking at it, particularly with a young horse.
Well, that's a broad one, but when the yearling sales are going on right now, so it's apt in a lot of ways because people shortlist a pedigree before they get to the sales. So we have a catalog page, and what's known as a catalog style pedigree, where you list 3 generations of the ancestry, plus on the page 3 generations of the female line. So you have what's under the first dam, the second dam, and the third dam. And if you've heard the term black type, well, the black type comes from that catalog page because the staked horses are actually put in thick black type on those pages. So under the first dam, it might be a half to Curlin. So Curlin, you've got right there in big black type with all his race record and whatnot. So that's Steve. That's the starting point where everybody, including our clients who are buying, say they'll look at that catalog page and we'll shortlist horses for them, because when you get to a sale like Keeneland, you've got 4,100 yearlings to look at, and it's impossible to see every one. So everybody pretty much starts off with a short list, and then they winnow it down. So you get to a sale, and then you start to look at that physical individual compared to what you got on the page. And these days what happens, Steve, with a lot of buyers, you're vetting the horse, you're getting heart scans, there's so much that's being done right now. You're scoping them for throats. You're looking at the X-rays for. There's a repository at these sales now where every horse is vetted. It costs like $500 to take X-rays, and every horse you have to have pretty much an X-ray in the repository at the sales company so anybody can take a look at it. And it takes a team of people to do it. And it's using the baseball analogy, Steve. It's like the old days. You had the old manager, and he just managed how he felt. He had this, information in his head. These days, you've got Moneyball, you've got analysts, you've got sabermetrics, you got major shifts taking place because people tell you that's where this guy's going to hit the ball. So it's it's very much that way right now.
When we then pull through the elements, and I introduced the conversation with, particularly at the start, and I indicated that probably the key factors when then translating a pedigree into potential on the racetrack. I brought up precociousness, Sid, distance aptitude, sprints or routes, surface preference, dirt, turf, synthetic, some wet track inclination, and then a topic you don't hear as often, the rate of development, because, of course, thoroughbreds will grow and not necessarily every sire that was precocious has precocious offspring. Rockport Harbor was a terrific 2-year-old. It turned out that his horses needed to get into the second half of their 3-year-old years before they started to show their best ability. So
exactly.
there's portions of this that just because a sire was something himself on the racetrack, or even the dam was, it doesn't always mean that their get are going to be the exact same kind of horse.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, those are all excellent points. And getting to your first point, some people come in and they're looking for early horses. And then there are other people. We have a client who you guys obviously know, Jerry Crawford of Donegal Racing.
Sure.
He only wants classic-type horses. He doesn't want to look at anything early. He doesn't want, he's looking at horses that stay 10 furlongs. You have other guys that come in that are new, they're coming to the game and they want a quick return on investment. So they're looking at, early 2-year-olds. And the shift for a long time was that there was a shift to that when the old owner breeders started to fizzle out. And there was a kind of a shift towards, this is why there's a proliferation of 2-year-old sales and whatnot. But, things always ebb and flow, and now there's a shift back. I mean, if you look at the leading sire of last year, it was Kitten's Joy, who was a distance horse on turf, and yet he led all sires in this country. And you have many other horses like that, like English Channel, for example. And English Channel is the perfect horse. He's the type of horse that might not have been in favor with a lot of people, but his horses tend to run for a long time. They win as older horses, and they keep going, and that's becoming, that's in favor as well now. There are other horses like Speightstown, who was not he didn't win his first stakes race till he was 6 years old, and yet, here, an example of what you talked about, he gets early horses a lot. He gets a lot of precocious horses and horses over the scale of distances as well. So when you're talking about stallions, I think it's always good. You can always project a new horse, but as you say, you can't make anything about that horse, any assessment until he's had his own runners, and then he may breed to type, he might not breed to type, and he may breed completely differently. So there's always something like that you have to look at, and that's true.
I'll give you. I'm going to go to Jeremy with a point, but I'm going to, Sid, when we come back, I want you to talk about the miraculous difference between half brothers, City Zip and Ghost Sapper, coming out of the same dam, and they couldn't have been more different race horses, and they couldn't have more different progeny profiles in terms of what they're getting as sires. It's to me, it's one of the most fascinating brother-sire combinations out there, Ghost Sapper and City Zip. Let's go to Jeremy, though.
Hey, Sid, great to have you on Night School, first-time guest here, and we always love when we get new people on in our fourth season. I wanted to touch on something you mentioned a minute or two ago about the owners and the breeders who involved in the particular horses. I remember Wayne Lucas years ago, people said, why do you win so many 2-year-old races? And he said, well, I train horses for people who race and sell horses. And so they want to get black type. They want to get these horses the easiest black type they can get, which usually comes in a 2-year-old race, so that they can sell and make their stallions worth more money. Ken Ramsey with Kitten's Joy and the Kitten's Joys that he owns, a lot of the things he's doing is trying to enhance the value of his sire when he can. So how much do you have to look at where the source of the horse is coming from?
Well, those are great points. And, when Wayne Lucas did get in, he came in from the quarter horse just like Bob Baffert did. And, he brought a lot of people in that, as you pointed out, wanted to hit early. And at that point, Jeremy, was the height of the bloodstock market, and you could just, make incredible money with a Grade 1 winning colt, the 2-year-old colt and stuff. And he was really excellent at doing stuff like that. Getting these horses early and making money on horses like that. He was buying at the top of the commercial marketplace and whatnot. And that was definitely something he did. And with the Ramseys, it's almost with the Ramseys, it's a really interesting situation because not too many people follow this paradigm that he does anymore. Now, I say anymore because in the old days, owner breeders used to support their own stallions, and they would breed their mares to the stallions, and they would race their horses. That's not done as much now, and Ramsey made his own stallion, Kitten's Joy, by getting all these horses, breeding to them, and now he's able to really reap the benefits of this horse. I mean, his horse has turned into a massive stallion, really a horse against type, and you could almost say that Ramsey's actually accomplished, Jeremy, what he set out to do, which was to make his stallion by breeding everything, racing him at various tracks, putting them on the turf in a lot of instances where they belonged, and really put a clinic up on how to really make your stallion. Now, of course, you're not going to be able to make your stallion unless that stallion has the material to do it. And there's a saying in the business: a stallion can either turn the switch on or he can't. And Mr. Ramsey's horse, Kitten's Joy, I mean, certainly can. I mean, you could probably breed a mule to it and get a stakes winner,
Oh, and that gets into prepotency and the ability to stamp a get and to improve the mares that the sire is delivered upon, and that's part of the amazing element of this story when it comes to Kitten's Joy, because here was Ramsey, Sid, he was gathering up $5,000 claimers,
exactly.
and six. Right, he put together a 150 horse broodmare band with nothing but cheap horses that he picked up anywhere he could.
Yeah, Mr. Ramsey, basically, you're right. A lot of these horses were claiming horses. He didn't spend a lot of money on these horses, and he decided, he wanted to stand this horse. He had a stud fee for this horse when he came out that was fairly high for a horse of that caliber, turf horse, that at the time people really didn't want. And it did not deter him. He pretty much made that horse by breeding everything to that horse. Now you get people like, Khalid Abdullah of Judmont Farms breeding to him, and Shadwell buying yearlings by him, and, got the cream of the buyers coming to him now. And he stands for a six-figure sum. But what he did, and again, put in the context of the current climate, there isn't anybody else really who's doing that kind of thing except for another client of mine, Charles Phipke. Does the same thing. He supports his own stallions. He's got Perfect Soul, who isn't as successful as Kitten's Joy has been. But there are not too many people that have the wherewithal, the staying power, and the drive to try to do that. Now, it used to be that was the case. In the old days, for example, you guys obviously the obvious example is Bold Ruler with the Phippses, Wheatley Stable, Gladys Phipps, and later her son Ogden Phipps. You get a stallion like that, and you breed, your mares, or you go into partnership with other people, and you breed to your stallion and you split the foals and whatnot. But that used to be the old paradigm of the owner-breeder. At Darby Dan, it was John Galbraith, breeding to his stallions like Roberto and whatnot. History is littered with those types of people. Paul Mellon, Max Gluck at Elmendorf. I mean, the stud farms really built that around that model. Later, as they vanished, and newer people came in, different stuff started to happen, most of which was the rise of the commercial marketplace.
And it's funny because one of the notes that I have here in front of me, commercial market versus homebreds, and this is a portion of the conversation that is really fairly nuanced, and we got to it right as a central core point when it comes to some specifics in here. Sid, take us back to Go Zapper and to City Zip, because I think it's a great dividing point for people to understand. Here are two sons of the same mare, half brothers, one by Carson City, a son of Mr. Prospector, or the Raise a Native line, and then the other, a son of Awesome Again, the deputy minister, vice regent near Arctic line, the Northern Dancer line. And the two of them are sires of no small note, $50,000 stud fee for Go Zapper, $25,000 for City Zip, and they get progeny that are very interesting. City Zip manages to get turf horses and sprinters. Go Zapper, more of a classic style horse. Talk about how one dam and the differences between two sire lines could then produce this kind of sons that end up major sires in their own right.
Yeah, and it's usually you don't get two sires that are half brothers that are both extremely successful, and City Zip was the older horse. He was the Carson City. He'd run pretty well. A typical type of Carson City that sprinter miler type of horse. Yeah, and he had gone to stud in New York, which just shows you really that he hadn't really been in demand by the time Go Zapper began his assault with Bobby Frankel. And when Go Zapper kind of started to achieve his Horse of the Year season, that year City Zip, I think he had 2 years at stud in New York, and Will Farish and Lane Zen went right in before this horse even had any runners, and he was standing for $7,500 in New York, bought the horse and brought him back to Lane's End, and doubled his stud fee for his third year to like $15,000, which is unheard of. All based on what Go Zapper was doing at the time. And of course, Go Zapper went on to, he was the Horse of the Year that year, and then the following year, I think he only made one start, won that race, and then he was retired. And if you recall, then Go Zapper went to stud for $200,000, even though he's 50 now. Just phenomenally expensive. Frank Stronach had bred both these horses. Of course, he kept Go Zapper, and Go Zapper at first, when he went to stud, appeared to be a major flop, whereas the brother was, as you pointed out, siring a wide range of horses, Steve, from sprinters to all-weather horses at a mile to turf horses at a mile and a quarter, mile and an eighth. I mean, it was just a phenomenal range and a degree of versatility that's really not seen in any stallion. And one of the things you might want to point out is that the Broodmare sire's Relaunch, who was a sire, a racehorse himself, of very good. He himself was a good enough turf horse to run against John Henry, and ran him really well at a mile and a half, and just lost the race, I recall. And he had, as a sire, went on to produce a lot of front-running stayers like Wacoit, obviously the Tis Now line, and all of that, horses that really stayed well, and turf as well. Relaunches from the In Reality sire line, and what you have with the Carson City horse is a horse that just exhibits the best of Carson City and Relaunch, and so he gets a real wide range of runners. Now with Go Zapper, what we found is that he tends to get very fast horses like he was. He stayed 10 furlongs and he was brilliant. But a lot of people thought he might have been even better as a faster horse at a shorter distance. He was really obviously well massaged and finessed by Frankel. But at any rate, he had incredible speed. He's from the deputy minister line of Awesome Again, and the two of them have just turned it on. In Ghost Zephyr's case, he started off looking like he wasn't much, and has suddenly become resurgent, and he's become a damn good stallion right now. He's standing at 50,000. I was in Kentucky a few weeks ago, before the sale, 3 weeks before the sale. I went to Adena Springs and I just saw him, and I'll tell you, Steve and Jeremy, you just forget, what a good-looking horse he is too. I mean, just an outstanding individual.
And Sid, to kind of bring this portion of a discussion into perspective, here's a clever maneuver by Lane's End when they acquired City Zip. I'm going to reference Unbridled Song, who of course had a outstanding career as a stallion, and the same style concept was attempted with a full brother, the unraced full brother of Unbridled Song, Spanish Steps. And
right.
The same concept was, here's a full brother to Unbridled Song. Why can't he have the same success as a stallion? And he stands in Florida. At least I don't know if he's still in Florida, but there was a move to try to utilize Spanish Steps and his proximity and potential, and it didn't work. It hasn't worked. Not that he didn't get a couple of good horses. It hasn't gotten a couple
Little
of good horses.
Mike, right?
Yeah, actually,
yeah.
Yes. Probably his best. Well, Sid, that's one of the great maxims in all of breeding, right? That every stallion gets at least one big horse.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and in his case, and in the case of Unbridled Song, as I just mentioned with these two horses, his broodmare sire is Cairo, who was a great turf horse, had been imported here. And in the case of Spanish Steps, he was, some of that came out with Little Mike, who was able to stay all that, on that trip on turf. Unbridled Song has had some turf horses, as you know, but, he's really known for these big, good-looking, fast type of 3-year-olds and whatnot. And so there was a bit of a difference there. Again, Unbridled Song, and everybody, knows this. I'm not saying anything different, something earth-shattering here, but in the breeding business, a big portion of a stallion's heft, his reputation comes from being able to attract top quality mares, obviously, because they're 50% of the equation, and unless you're a horse like Kitten's Joy, you can get anything. But a horse like, obviously, Unbridled Song, with his race record, physique, and reputation, was able to get a tremendous book of mares, whereas Spanish Steps, unheralded, really had to make his own way. And it's very difficult for a horse like that. It stood for like $5,000, I guess, wherever he was, Indiana maybe. And, ultimately, when you have these stallions and you start to look at, what's happened to them, it's the quality of the mare book. And I might point out to a lot of your listeners, like, you'll notice a lot of first crop horses, like, say, the Super Saver this year with his first crop of horses coming out, and Gangbusters and Warriors Reward. You'll find that a lot of times, and it may be a good handicapping angle in some ways too, first crop horses tend to get, relative to who they are, the best mares that they're going to get. So you'll see that each subsequent crop of a stallion will diminish. Now, if he hits by the time it's the fourth crop and his 2-year-old starts to hit, there's a resurgence in that fifth crop. He'll start to get better mares again. So then you can count on that going, forward from there. But usually there's a decline, and what happens is, and here's one of the reasons for it, young horses, when you're a young horse, a lot of breeders will send stakes, older producing mares, stakes producers, older mares to the young horse, and vice versa. To the established stallion, they'll send young mares off the track. So when you think of it, what's more reliable are the producers, right? And so those first crop stallions tend to get more producers, and they get a big help from them. It's only the older horses, once they're proven, you start to send young mares, and they're able to do it with them. So it's a complex stuff, and even within experts in this business, everybody doesn't understand all the nuances that take place. But there's so many facets to it, and from a handicapping aspect, some of the stuff that we've touched upon can possibly be used, as can nicks and dosage and surface. You'll be able to find out that certain crosses and certain horses have a tendency for certain, Warfront, for example, is a tremendous stallion, has a distinct affinity for grass, just like the Danzig line did, even though he himself was only a dirt runner. And there's a case, Steve, where what you saw as a racehorse is not what you're seeing as a sire. He's breeding back to his bloodlines.
Well, Sid, as I figured, this was going to be impossible and too unwieldy to get as much as we'd like in the conversation. I do want to spend a minute, though, before we wrap up. I want you to talk about Work Thoroughbred Consultants, your friend and colleague that was taken from the industry way too early, Jack Work, and Enix, and the tremendous resource that you and the team offer in terms of pedigree consulting, and certainly to help pick out horses for those that are going to buy to race and buy to sell. Talk about the business side of your efforts.
Sure, and I'll tell you real quickly, Steve and Jeremy, we just released a new app that we're really proud of on Friday, really Saturday, and your listeners can go to the Apple. Unfortunately, it's only for Apple products, iOS devices, but you can go to the Apple Store and just search Enix and download it onto your phone or your iPad. And it's a terrific app where it's for the sales, for example. You can pick out any sale you want. Right now, the Keeneland September is going on, and you can get all the nicks for the horses in the sale. There's a bunch of stuff you can do. There's a news feed. There's a mare match facility. And I encourage anybody who's interested in pedigrees to download it. It's a free download, and you can use it. And the other thing I might point out to your listeners is at our website, workhorse.com, there's a real interesting area there where you can actually, it's a help to pedigree handicapping, is say you know the sire and the dam of a horse or a 2-year-old that's just come up. You can go there, it's free. You just have to register. You just have to log in. You have to register, get a login and a password. You can go up there. You can put the sire and the dam in. You can get a pedigree sheet that gives you the inbreeding, the 5-generation pedigree with dosage, whatnot. And there's a button there where you can click. You can get the nick rating, and you can click on a button there where it has view stakes winners on this cross, and they'll come up, the stakes winners on that cross, and it'll tell you the highest level they won, what distances that they've won on, so that you can see if they're all weather, turf, or dirt. You can click on the name and see what the races were and the distances they won, and it's I think a handy facility for your pedigree handicapping part, and it's all free too, by the way, up there. So those are a couple of the things I would suggest: the app and the website. And the company, of course, was formed by my good friend Jack Work, who died in 2010. And Jack wanted me to, take over the company after he died. And so right now, I'm the CEO and president. I work with Jack's associates who are still there, including Roger Lyons, who was the co-developer of the work rating. A terrific, just a massive intellectual, and he's still there, and he's still tinkering with stuff, and the whole team there. It's a terrific team, and so we're really happy to continue what Jack and Roger had started.
Well, and for those that may have heard the name Workhorse, but it's WERK.
Yes,
WERK.
Workhorse.com. You can get there, Steve, by either WERKHorse.com or Enix.com. That's right to our website. And, of course, you can just go onto the Apple Store and download the app. But I want to thank you and Jeremy for having me on.